So I've just arrived at basically like South Africa's greatest armory ever, and right behind me is a bloody anti-aircraft gun which is bigger than me.
Russian Dushka DSHKM, 12-7-108mm, ammo looks like this. Belted anti-aircraft gun. What you see here is a mix of armor-piercing incendiary and armor-piercing incendiary tracer.
In your vault, I see anti-aircraft gun, machine guns, other stuff I can't mention. How on earth, in South Africa, can this happen?
Alright, for starters, you've got to remember something. Lord of War based on a Russian arms dealer, Victor Boot, loosely based on him. And, it's not one of the legal guys. What we do is government sanctioned. We have the correct licenses from the authorities. We're registered at the Department of Defense. We have what's called the National Conventional Arms Control Committee permit, and that's what enables us to partake in this. So, our government decides who we can supply. We apply for the correct contracting permits, import permits, export permits, and obviously what we do is very heavily legislated. But in reality, this is more of an admin game. We spend our life doing compliance and just making sure our paperwork is correct to be able to supply anybody who isn't embargoed, sanctioned, and on a blacklist.
So if you were, assuming you're a civilian, if you wanted to defend your house, what would you recommend?
That anti-aircraft gun.
Well, I mean, yes. But
look, what I could tell you, governments, yes, most certainly. Some of the private companies that supply governments, the other South African companies that manufacture armoured personnel carriers, for example, they may want to fit a remote weapon station. We'd supply the weapons for that remote station to be able to, integrate into their platform for export. Over here, this is a Surname STG-44, MP-44. Have a look at the stocks. This would have been a year earlier in production, and if you have a look at this, what's quite interesting, obviously later in the war, tool marks, the finishing on the earlier variant is far nicer. Threaded muzzle nut, you don't get that on the later variant. They had to get these into service and get them out into the war. And I find the same with the Mausers. If you start looking at the early World War Mausers, the finish on them is just a lot better. Some of the parts were molded instead of stamped. They were glued. They're just nicer guns. But very rare. Well, obviously, as a commercial dealer as well, we work with the SAPS. We have a very good relationship with the SAPS. And if we do a civilian import, we apply for an import permit. The police look at the documentation. They approve this. The weapons have to comply. For example, modern sporting rifles would be semi-auto. We'd fly them in, they'd go to guard force, the police would do an inspection, make sure that the permit correlates with what's been imported, and the process can take time. It can take 3 months, it can take 6 months. Our experience on the military side, if we apply for a permit through NCACC, I've had permits as quick as 7 to 14 days. That department seems to be extremely efficient.
So here's something you don't see every day. The original Springfield M1 Garand. I mean, if you know your war movies, if you know World War II especially, this was an official rifle of the American infantry.
The problem is, where do you find this stuff? You've got to find a supply, and you're not going to jump on a plane and just rock up at a Bulgarian arsenal factory and say, I'm here to buy AK-47 rifles. They're going to chase you away, probably at gunpoint. So that's one of the problems. So realistically, competitors out there, yes, there are a couple of companies that do something very similar. But we try and position ourselves as a sort of a niche supplier. Serious piece of kit here. What I can tell you, this is an M53. It's a copy, effectively, Yugoslavian copy of the MG42. Runs an 8mm Mauser as well, so it's the same caliber. Parts commonality, exactly the same thing, just made under license elsewhere. Rate of fire about 1,200 rounds a minute. They call it Hitler's buzzsaw for a reason. This is a proper piece of kit. One of the only belt-fed machine guns to feed the rounds upside down. What the guys know when you load a belt-fed, brass to the grass. Not with these. So what happens with this? It has a feeds from the bottom. So the rounds would go upside down as opposed to a traditional system, and then it's ready to fire. Quick change barrel system as well, quite neat on this particular system. back into action. Looking for stock is a big thing. You've got to be able to find stock, and this conflict in Ukraine and Russia hasn't helped the situation because all the old stockpiles have started drying up. Surplus Acc No 76239 was 10 a penny and cheap, and now if I buy it from China, it's a 7-month lead time to be able to get the stock. Our relationship's fantastic with our defence force. We can't mention the unit we've supplied, but we've got a new weapon system from CZ that's going to our defence force now. In fact, I fly out to Czech Republic this weekend. With Arms Corps representatives as well as Defence Force members to go and do the testing on the system that's been decided on. So, which, funny enough, is the new Bren 2 multi-caliber system, which will be going to some of our troops. And our relationship with the guys is great. If they want to test something, we've had a request for specialist gear that is not that easy to find, and we'll bring it in, we'll apply for the permits, bring it in, let them trial it, and if this is what they're looking for, make it happen, get the weapons into the guys' hands.
So Mark, for the audience, who the hell buys this?
Governments or anybody with a National Conventional Arms Control permit, if they qualify in terms of legislation, we apply for a transfer. But generally speaking, this would go to either companies that manufacture APCs, who then have remote weapon stations on those vehicles, or pintle mounts for this sort of thing, and that would then go to their clients. So generally government-to-government transfers.
When the peaceful protests arrive next time, I know exactly where to go. You won't, because I'm not telling you where we are. But if people want to get hold of you, I assume Twitter maybe is the best spot?
Twitter's a good spot. Hit us up on Twitter. We can send you contact details. Obviously, you'd go through a vetting process, so we can determine...
the one I went through, by the way. You think this video took 3 hours to make? No, it took months. But anyway.